Welcome to another episode of In the Nude. Today, we're going to have an amazing naked conversation with Beth Jones, a being devoted to helping go getters go get a life they truly love by looking at their motivation and heart and founding actions in self and service instead of survival. The first question I want to ask you might be a little bit of a doozy, but I wanted to know what your favorite lesson you've ever learned from a situation that you would never wish on anyone would be.
Wow, what a question. What a great question. And thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. I'm happy to be here today. So, I'm gonna tell you about something very recent that has happened because I think this is a great lesson. It's about unconscious bias. And I recently got married. Yay me, which is
Oh,
a wonderful thing on the backside of a lot of pain in a first marriage, and now I'm married to a wonderful human being, my reward for all of my hard work to get where I am today. And he's a black man. And I had to go through a process to be able to see him, to be able to find him. God sent him to me as my reward. I had to see him, right? To be able to be in a relationship with him. And I went through a journey not too long ago where I realized that I was carrying an unconscious bias in the dating world around men of color. And you could look at my dating profile, and there were no filters around race or ethnicity. And they would come through as suggestions to me. And I would hear this little voice in my head, and I would just scroll past. And I wasn't recognizing even then the voice in my head, right? So I'm a trained investigator. That's what I used to do in my former career as a forensic accountant. So I put facts together, but I'm always doing it from today, looking backward, right? So it's kind of what I was doing, trying to understand what was happening. So I knew I had been hearing this voice in my head, and I didn't like register the voice, right? It was there, and so that would cause me to swipe. I met somebody in the dating process who was a black man. I did not know that from the profiles. And we're arranging some time to meet. And in the text messages, he says, "Oh, by the way, I'm a tall black man." And I was like, didn't faze me. Okay, fine. So I meet him. And he says to me, he asked me if I have dated a black man before. And I said, no. And he goes, "Well, I don't want to be a white girl's first experiment." And I was like, what does that mean? Right? Well, of course, that sent me to in this place of like, oh, like, why haven't I? Like, what's up with this? Right. And I had to really
yeah.
think about it. And I was able to trace it back to something that happened to me when I was in high school with my father. And the reaction that I had to the interaction with my father was a consistent sort of survival mechanism in the way that I dealt with him. He would have a reaction that was less than pleasant to something that was happening. And my MO for many things was just to shut it off. Like, we're closing that door, never going there again.
Yeah.
And I had wanted to take a black guy who was in my Sunday school class to Sadie Hawkins dance. I'm now dating myself, I've been told. My sophomore year of high school, and my dad got really very angry about that. And it was a very visceral reaction. And I didn't, at that age, 15, why is that happening? But I just shut that down completely. I shut the door, the never again door, and I carried it for 40 years. And it opened because the guy God was sending to me that is now my husband is a black man. I had to be able to see him. So I went through this process to be able to open my eyes and recognize why I had been passing by all of those profiles in the dating world. What I think is very interesting about that is, that caused me to think about, well, it was there in my personal life. And it's interesting. So did it show up in other parts of my life, like professionally, right? I've thought about
Yeah.
that one. I think that the very profound lesson that I learned was another teaching moment for me about the way that our survival patterns, even something that might seem like really not that big of a deal in the moment when it happens, can sit with us for so long and impact literally every aspect of our life, as this was obviously, and as I mentioned, I've, thought about it even back into my former career and, into my leadership style. And I had a conversation with somebody recently about this impact that. And for me to say no would be, I think, naive and irresponsible. I hope it didn't adversely impact anyone, but I know it lived inside of me, right? So it's just
Yeah.
an interesting lesson that I've had and kind of an interesting series of events that's happened in the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Which has been very profound to me.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
beautifully profound story scenario to have to go through. I love the fact that instead of being offended by the Inquisition or the statement of, I don't want to be the experiment, you got inquisitive,
Mm,
That
yeah,
pattern of behavior of 'cause we can when alarm goes off, when somebody says something, we have the choice of reaction and defense or
100%.
reaction and curiosity, and
Yep.
defense doesn't allow for the ability for something to be adjusted or changed, and to be curious doesn't mean the person's right, it just allows for the opportunity to assess. And it takes some humility, it takes some wisdom, it
Mhm.
takes some being willing to be uncomfortable with yourself to be able to do that. And I love that you were willing to take that invitation, not because it was a command, but because you received it and thought, I want to check.
Mhm. I think when those things happen to us, they are exactly as you said, opportunities to get very curious about why have I been responding or did I respond the way that I was responding? Because my experience is that in most cases, when we react, that is pressure on a trigger that's tied back to something that's inside of us. And the only way that we can move past that to heal from it is to be curious about what it is and go and do the work to dig back into the root cause and sort of reprogram ourselves from that root cause. And, that can take a lot of different formats on what that reprogramming or the healing, as I refer to it, what that looks like. But it's an opportunity to get curious. And then it's an improvement in your life once you've gotten curious and done the work around that particular issue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got a question for you. How do you
sure.
navigate in your brain the difference between when something is something to be investigated and when something is just factual? What I mean by that, it's a big question. When somebody brings something to you like that, right?
Hmm.
I don't want to be
Hmm.
somebody's experiment. You can sit there and question yourself and assess, okay, I haven't dated anybody. Why is that? And break it down. And it could be that you didn't have any opportunities, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It could be that you didn't have because of how you were raised and where you were, that you didn't have the proximity for that to happen. But sometimes it can be founded in the fact there was a moment. But how do you mitigate knowing when the line is there because of like why the line is there? Why you know what I mean? If that makes sense. And my question's not being very
No,
clear.
it does. No, because let's just take opportunity, right? Let's just say that I didn't have men of color coming through the dating profile, right? And I actually have talked about this and written about this exact topic because I got lucky that my life created the circumstances for me to have the opportunity to get curious, dig into it, figure out what it was, why, and correct it in my life and my knowing and how I operate now, right? Think about if I had never had that opportunity, right? And I think that's kind of a little bit of what you're getting at here, right? Is because my life created the specific set of circumstances that I need to give me the opportunity. I think it comes from God, universe, source, higher
Yeah.
power, however you want to refer to it, gave me the opportunity, created the particular specific set of circumstances to give me that opportunity, right? And, the question about, being curious or like, it just doesn't present itself. I mean, I got lucky. So if it does present itself, that's the opportunity to get curious and say, okay, why? Like, right, to ask questions about this. The gentleman that I was talking to about this very topic, we were talking about unconscious bias and how it works. And that's the thing about unconscious bias is we're unconscious to it, right?
Mhm.
And he was even talking to me. I grew up in the Middle East and Southeast Asia and have worked all over the world. So, multicultural living and interactions is just part of who I am. When we were talking about the idea of whether or not it had shown up in my leadership style professionally, he introduced me to a phrase I'd never heard before called aversive racism, which is somebody like me going, well, how can that be possible? Because I've been multicultural, lived all over the world, worked with people but yet there might be something hanging there that I'm not consciously aware of. Right. And so I might have done things that, are in that. I don't even like to say the words associated with me, but done things. I hope not, but I can't say for sure. I don't know. And again, that would be irresponsible and naive of me to say, no way, it didn't happen. Right. And
Yeah.
so I think we get the opportunity to be able to really evaluate and dig into that, right? And one of the things that he said to me is how we counter all of those things is the phrase he used, conscious living. And that is a state of curiosity to me, right? Being conscious, like opening your eyes and looking around and going, why? Like, right, asking questions and beginning to have an awareness that allows us to push on these things that are ingrained in us and to be able to then move past them if we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ability to be flexible is the means to be able to overcome. Strength
Yes.
is flexibility and the ability to change opinions and change thought processes and say, "I was wrong," or say, "Oh, I didn't think about that before," is such strength, even when you might have been told that isn't the truth.
Yes, yes, and it is, and, I mean, I think as human beings, we come into this lifetime, the one that we're in, with an opportunity to evolve, to always work toward being the highest and best version in this moment of who I can possibly be, and I think that it goes into that, right? So these things that are sort of given to us that were not ours, but somebody gave it to us, and now we've taken it on as if it's ours. Those are opportunities to decide whether or not that is really mine. Do I really want that? Do I really want to be in that place? Is that the human being I want to be? And if the answer to that is no way, like it was for me, you do something about it. And that's a beautiful opportunity to be given.
In this particular circumstance of this lesson you learned, you realized you had this unconscious bias. How did you go about making, because it's never a switch, right? It's tiny shifts here or there. How did you go about doing that for yourself to get
This
to a
was a
place?
switch. No, this was a
This was
switch.
switch. Okay.
Yeah. So, and a little bit of additional background there. So I'd been dating for probably about 18 months, and I was becoming a little tired of the pool that was coming through and some of the things that I was experiencing. And so for me, like, when I figured this out, it was literally like a eureka moment, because I was like, oh, like the population, I don't even, it just got infinitely bigger of
Yeah.
potential candidates out there. And, literally within 2 weeks, here comes Eddie, my husband. Right? And so, I mean, this literally was a switch. And you know, I think that goes back to the decision. It did take me long to figure out the person who I want to be. And for me, I knew that I don't want any part. And in fact, I wrestled with that. Like, I asked myself, am I racist? Am I prejudiced? And that felt it just like repulsed me to have that question in me. But I was forced to ask that question, right? Because of what I was experiencing. And two might have been part of it. Like, I don't want to be that person. And so it was an immediate flip for me. And I feel like asking ourselves those questions, however you receive spiritual messaging in your body, and that's the opportunity to flip the switch. I feel like, once you have an awareness, that great phrase now, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's
Yeah.
kind of the place that I was in, right? And I was like, I don't want that anymore. I've done that in other times in my life. I mean, my journey to where I am today started with a life altering event almost 6 years ago. And it's when I became aware, like consciously aware, that I had been sexually abused when I was 5 years old. I realized that in the particular event that I was in, and it was a hypnotherapy session. When I came back to conscious awareness, I also had this overwhelming feeling that I had no idea who I really am. And if I didn't know, nobody else could know me. And that was terrifying, more terrifying than what I'd experienced in the hypnotherapy and what that had revealed to me about the abuse. And I sat in that for probably about, I don't know, a small number of days. That feeling of desolation and probably depression. I don't suffer from depression, but I'm imagining that's what it felt. It was a very dark place that I was in for a few days, but it's very incongruent with who I am as a person. Like, I mean, I'm wearing pink. I love color. There's yellow behind me. I'm the optimist and the one who's got so much hope that I can frustrate people. Like, how can you be so optimistic about whatever the situation is, right? And so for me to be in that place of that darkness and hopelessness, and I couldn't stay there for any period of time. And so I began the process of moving myself out of that, which, I talk about that as part of like how I got my healing journey going. Right? And so when I realized, like, I came to a point where I realized fairly quick, I was like, oh, I'm actually a survivor. I could identify myself as a survivor the way that I had been living my life for 45 years at that point. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? I could see it. Like, I was reading books, and I'd been in trauma therapy for a little while and in some support groups. And I read a very profound book by a guy, well, profound for me, by a guy called Pete Walker, that's about survival patterns with people who suffer from complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm written I'll write all over the pages of that book. You're shaking, you know it, right?
I've
It's
read
an
that one
amazing
too.
book. So
Yeah, it was
I'm
really
like,
helpful for me too.
I'm all over the pages of that book. And for me, I had vocabulary that I had never had before. Like, there were things, I'll give you an example, and it's in the book. There's a term, parentectomy, which is
Okay.
cutting off the parental relationship, and the dectomy is cutting out something that's literally trying to kill you. Well, I had done that about 12 years before. I was completely estranged from my parents and my family, and I'm no longer in that place, but I was completely estranged at that point in time. And I could describe that to people in years before. You have the conversations in casual settings or business settings, and family comes up, and I would be honest, I'm estranged from them, but I would always be sure to overlay on that. But I'm not the black sheep. It was my choice. Like I did it out of, so I could describe it like that, but I didn't have vocabulary. And I certainly hadn't tied it to being a survivor. And here it is in this book, right? And so when I read that book, and there are multiple things, the 4 F's, my survival responses,
Yeah.
mine are, I'm a freeze fawn combination. I had only ever heard fight or flight before that. And so none of that resonated. So I did not identify as a survivor until I read this book. And here I am all over these pages. But that book also gives you stories of people who are healing. And I was like, oh, like I can do something about this. And when I realized that, the switch flipped. I was like, I'm not living that way anymore because of what other people did to hurt me. And that immediately turned the switch. Now, it's a long process to heal from what I had to deal with. I had a massive wall that had all this trauma and abuse and all my unprocessed emotions, a lot of not great coping mechanisms that were keeping me isolated really from the world, from living my life fully. And I had to break that down. And that was a process. It was a long process and it was painful. But your point about like flipping the switch, like, does it happen? I think the switch does flip, but what we do about it afterward, that may take some time to sort of re-engineer, right? But
Yeah.
I think, and I hope for everybody, people who are listening to this, who hear me talk about this, that you recognize your moment. A lot of people call it the rock bottom moment or the pivot point, right? I think you can apply that in a lot of different ways in your life. And, what I was talking about before, that experience around the unconscious bias, my pivot point is when that guy said that to me about not wanting to be someone's experiment, right? And
Yeah.
so maybe it's just reframing it a little bit,
Yeah.
that the change happens, but then the work to unwind the past and what you're carrying and find out, in my case, who you actually are, takes some time.
I think it's a linguistic difference for me. I think
Mm,
of the aha moment as the moment that you're given the opportunity to decide how you're gonna show up, but every
mm,
day that you're choosing how to show up
mhm.
is the instead of it being a switch, it's a choice, if that makes sense?
I
So
completely agree with that.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
for in my head, when the realization is often a switch where you finally see,
Mhm,
it's kind of like
mhm.
you turn the light on, you're like,
You're
"Whoa."
awake,
Yeah, you
right?
finally
Yes.
you're aware, but
Yeah.
the choice to do something with it isn't a one-off.
What
It's a every
that's
moment, every choice, and so that's more like what I
100%.
meant as far as, like,
Yeah, yeah, no,
for
you are
you.
100% correct.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
for you, I didn't
yeah.
know if there was a in that minutia of checking in with yourself about the bias, you have this, "Okay, maybe I need to sit there," and you go back
Mm,
and see that moment. Sometimes it can just be the realization, like, here's a silly one in my life. I used to have a trigger response with messes, right?
mm,
I'd go
okay.
from being very calm to being very, like, violently, in Clue, with the flames licking up neck, or, like, Inside Out with the red character, like, that is how I felt in my body anytime there was a mess.
Oh,
And I
mm,
knew why, because I used to have my mom used to react in rage if there was a
yes,
mess. And so for me,
yes.
I thought I was the monster, that I had become it,
Uh, yes.
right? And that book that you mentioned, the Pete Walker book, I had the aha moment of, I didn't become the monster. I was reacting in trigger of fear of having to relive the fear that it was.
Mhm. Yes.
And that aha moment for me was the light switch. And what it took was every time that a mess happened, I would say out loud, this was like, I made the choice when the switch happened, is I would just say out loud, it's just a mess. We can clean it up. And I was saying it both to my kid,
Mhm.
but also to my kid
Yeah,
in me,
yeah,
because I needed those words. And so I'd
yes,
bend down with my kid and we'd clean up the mess. And I'd be
yes.
like, I would take deep breaths and I'd say, I'm sorry that in the past I've been reacting in anger when you're just trying to do something and messes happen.
Yeah.
That's on me, not on you. And I would say those things aloud every time. Now it's nothing. I don't even have any type of reaction. And
Mhm.
like it happened fairly quickly because I started doing that. But
Yeah.
the aha moment of realizing what I was doing isn't an aha moment in application of adjusting because we can understand something in our brain, but metabolizing it into our life and making it applied, that's where I don't feel like it's a switch. That's where I feel like
No, I
it's
agree. It's
a
not.
lot
No.
of arduent, at least for me, it's a lot of arduent work of unwinding and uncoiling and then relining up what we want.
Yes, I agree with you. And that's, I mean, I said the same thing talking about the a long time for me to unwind the past and reprogram,
Mhm.
right? And that does. And I mean, there's a lot of therapy, a lot of book reading, a lot of support group, a lot of spending time in nature, just letting myself process all different types of energetic healing that I
Mhm.
still, and I still do this. So,
Yeah.
to your point on that, I have dealt with at least what I am aware of in
Yeah.
my past. I've dealt with a lot of that, but I mean, as things come up, I'm dealing with them, as I told you. And
Yeah.
what I believe about us as human beings is the healing journey is a lifelong journey because we are going to be encountering people throughout our life that are in various stages of their own survivorship, ranging from you're very unhealthy to you're really healthy as a survivor, right? And the vast majority of us are survivors. Right? We
Yeah.
are of some sort of trauma or abuse, right? And what I my experience and what I think is the truth is that we have to once we realize this the first time, like the mess, oh, like I have got, what you experienced and what I've experienced, you clean up backward looking. And when you're doing that, that takes a long time because there's a lot to deal with. And it just takes time, as you've mentioned. But you are building a tool set that works for you. And when you need it, when something happens in the future, because it will, you have those on board already. And so we become faster and more resilient in the future. Right? But that is a long process. And within that, to your point, are the choices every single day to do the work and to show up in a different way. And sometimes that is really, really hard and really, really painful. But when you do it enough, you come to a very different, you just come to a great, beautiful, wonderful place.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I like to word it this way. There's work no matter what choice you live your life. Anybody who lives a life knows that there's work, right?
Mhm.
If you don't clean up as you go, there's a big mess at the end. If you clean up as you
Mhm.
go, there's work there. Like it's the same amount of work. It's just a matter of when you choose to do it. And I find healing if you want to view it as work, if you want to view it as arduous, if you want to view it as a bother, you can, but you're the one who's going to have to do it. So for
Mhm.
me, I
Yeah.
brand my journey and I brand the work of it as a way to show up and, like, date myself, right? I show
Yeah.
up and I say, "Okay, I get to explore. I get to get messy," and, like, when you meet somebody, you're excited about finding and knowing them.
Mhm.
I had to figure out who I was as an adult because I
Me too.
didn't know who I was,
Yep. Yep. Me
and
too.
I at first was so frustrated with it. I was so
Me
angry at the,
too.
like, having to do that. I can't believe I'm this age and I don't know, and I'm having to relive and have these memories I didn't even know I had come up and have to
Mhm.
deal with and process. It's so frustrating, and then I was like, "I am tired of being frustrated at my life." And so I decided, "No, you know what? I'm not gonna be frustrated at I'm gonna
Yeah.
decide I wouldn't be frustrated if I was doing this for a best friend. I'm gonna be my own best friend. All right,
Yeah.
let's go." And I
Mhm.
changed my perspective, and it isn't that isn't like a light switch. It isn't like it I chose when I started to feel frustrated, to be like, "Okay, I can choose to sit in this frustration, or I can choose to view it like I'm on a date with
Mhm.
myself. I'm gonna choose to invest and care and be okay with it taking time
Mhm.
because I wouldn't have an issue if it was getting to know a best friend."
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
a great way to look at it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's the same approach that I took, and I tell people there's a point about it being work, and it is hard work. It's deeply painful in some cases, and what I've always said about it is for me it was the most excruciatingly painful thing that I've ever done, but it's also the most beautiful because on the outcome of it was that I found me. I discovered who I am, including my purpose. Like I know why I suffered for 45 years. I know why my grandfather did that to me when I was 5. I know why I experienced some of the other trauma and abuse that I've lived through and why I lived my life the way I did. And now for me it's entirely about relatability to the people that I serve because I can share my story and my experience with them. But it's that process of I guess, I mean, it's a great way to say it, right? Dating myself, discovering who am I really? And yes, there is a lot of frustration. I mean, it put me into a very dark place when I realized that about myself, that I don't know anything about who I am. Like, I literally did not know my favorite color. Like, I mean, I couldn't tell you anything. I think a lot of us have
I had a
experienced that.
realization that my favorite sandwich that I'd always have as my favorite sandwich, I don't actually like.
I'm not surprised by that at all. I'm not, right? Somebody made it for you and gave you that label. "Oh, this is your favorite sandwich," and you adopted it. Okay, I guess this is my favorite sandwich, right?
Yeah,
I believe, absolutely, I know that that's true, that that kind of stuff happens. It's crazy.
yeah,
But I think, the opportunity to discover who we are, and we're all amazing. Right? Beneath the trauma and the human conditioning, we are amazing human beings. And to be able to discover that person and then live as that person is wonderful. The word heal for me is an acronym that means to hope, evolve, and love. And the evolve part is where we do all this really difficult work, the hard work. But what we get from that is love, and that begins with self-love that starts to emerge when you're doing the work to evolve and shed all of that stuff that's holding you back. That's not yours. You just took it on as yours because somebody else did something to you and you need to protect yourself. Perfectly normal, made sense at the time, but we carry it far too long. And when you can shed that and you get to see like what an amazing person you really are, we all are,
yeah,
that's self-love, right? And that, then obviously opens up your ability to engage in relationships with people in different ways, show up differently.
yeah.
But I like the dating analogy. It was because that's probably what I was doing too. I mean, I'm getting to know myself, and it's a good
Yeah.
one.
No,
Yeah.
I do feel the need to clarify when I say that I can choose to have the frustration. It didn't mean that the frustration necessarily went away because there still is validity
Doesn't
to that frustration. It just
absolutely.
means that I give myself another option to see it a different way. I can say,
Yes.
yes, okay, it is infuriating that I lived through that. I shouldn't have. That was messed up. Also, I don't want to continuously feed into that feeling. How can I view it differently?
Yes.
And so it's
Yes.
both and I didn't say
It
that
is.
before, and I felt the need to add that just in case
Yes.
because it isn't denying that there's frustration or denying that it's messed up or denying the irritation and hurt because all of those are
All are very
good.
true.
Yeah.
Very true. And they still are true
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's like when you look back at your life, for me, I can look back at my life and what I can say is I don't ever, ever want anybody to live through what I lived through. And I'm grateful, so grateful that I'm here now. And if it took that, I'm okay.
Right there with you. Right there
Yeah.
with you. Yeah, I'm in the exact same place. I mean, I said that I know I have been through what I've been through to be able to share my story with other people because I don't want people to experience what I've experienced, but there are a whole lot of people who have. And
Yeah.
there is a different way, which is what we're saying, right? I mean, you
Mhm.
don't have to live encumbered by that for the rest of your life. Once you
Yeah.
become aware, you can actually do something about it.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to know. You too can heal. That's what I want to tell
You can
them.
be a heal and you're not alone in the process. It doesn't
No,
and the more alone you feel if you have this realization of what your life was, and then you see this, like, long road ahead of, "I'm here, but I wanna be there, and I don't know how to get there," and then you start the process, and it feels so defeating, and if you feel alone in that frustration, you're more likely to give up. But our life isn't a line, a timeline that just goes from here to here, it's more like a financial trend. Right? And there are time frames where you're gonna have low points where you're, reverting, but it's not actually reversion because you're still
Mm,
watching the trends. And if in that low point, you feel like I just can't. I'm the broken one that can't ever do and you give up right there, that's the only way you actually lose. Because if you keep
yes,
going, it
yes,
will continue to trend. Because if you keep investing and you keep learning and you keep being
100%.
inquisitive.
Yes. So I talk about this in my acronym HOPE. The H is hope. And that's the exact point that I talk about because if you don't have hope, and I'm not talking, I mean, I always use the daily affirmations example and they're great and some people love them. I don't do them. They're
Yeah.
not my thing, but for some people they are. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is seeing that trend line and you see that trend line in your own life, the upward trend line. You see it in your own life, but you see it in people like me and people like you who've been there and can talk honestly about it. Right? And I told you, like, I'm back and forth all the time. When
Mhm.
I going through that unconscious bias thing was, I mean, there was a moment when I was in a trough, I was like, what? I mean, like, there's a part of me that I don't like this, right? And so it took me down a little bit, but overall, the trend line is going up. I've had something that happened even more recently that has taken me back down. It goes into the family generational trauma that I deal with. And I have had to really draw on all of my healing tools to get me through that. A lot of therapy, really heavy time with my therapist that I've been spending to deal with it, but I've done it. And so I see it going up.
Yeah.
And that is what hope for me is, that fuel that feeds the healing journey. Because to your point, if you don't have it, you will quit because
Yeah.
it's just too hard.
Yeah.
It's too hard and the results are not apparent a lot of times, or we close our eyes to what we've already come through. And if you don't have the ability to feed that, to fuel yourself through hope that I can continue this trend line up because other people have done it, you'll quit. To your point, exactly. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. It isn't that the option of giving up is less work. It's just not work you choose. And
Mm,
sometimes not choosing the work feels easier. When you're just handed it, you don't have choice, and that's where it becomes trauma because the opposite of trauma is choice. And so if you're wanting your life to look different in that moment of whatever that moment is, if you're starting at base zero, if you're starting on a low point, if you're at a high point, every time you make a choice to sit there and choose to be inquisitive and choose to be
mhm.
reflective and choose to go with your gut and choose to self-love or give grace, you're counteracting the abuse. You're choosing
You
you.
are. You're winning.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes,
that's how I look at it. You're
literally,
winning.
every time.
Right?
Like, if you
Every
don't
single
choose, if you
time.
go back to default, they're winning.
Yeah, I use the word wretched abuser to talk about all of the things that I have done to myself.
Mhm,
And I've talked about it. I first developed that phrase for myself around my inner critic because mine was very loud and obnoxious at one
mhm,
time.
same.
Common. But there are other things, other coping mechanisms that I had that were also me abusing me. And for me today, I would say to you, if I made the conscious choice not to move forward, I would be re traumatizing myself again. And
Mhm.
that is activating the wretched abuser. And I don't want to do that. My
Yeah,
choice is not to give that individual any power. And yes, it comes from what other people have done to me. But when we make the choice not to do the work, we make the choice to allow our inner critic to yell at us, when we make the choice for what somebody else did to us, close us off from being the vibrant human being who we are becoming our own worst abuser because
yeah,
we're doing it to ourselves.
yeah,
Right. And you do have to get to the point where you realize that, right? And to the point we were talking about earlier, it takes a while. I think that is the switch. I don't think that comes on quickly. But if you can get that in your mind that you are, at a minimum, when you make the choice to not do it, at a minimum, you are prolonging what the other person did to you, right? You're holding it, right?
Here's a good example for anybody who's struggling to know how they play a part. Most everybody's been in a scenario where there's an antagonist who's being the loud person who's abusing, right? The person
Mm,
who's yelling, the person who's hitting, the person who's attacking, the person who's belittling, that person who's vocalizing. But in that room where that person is being the active action taker, there are people who are in that room that aren't receiving it, that
mhm.
are sitting there silently, and you know how you feel about those people who sat silently while you got hurt.
Yeah.
If you don't choose to get up for yourself, if you don't choose to see what's there and be honest, you're choosing to show up like that silent person and continue the abuse. And it's a beautiful gift you can give yourself. It's not
Yes.
that you chose to have those things happen to you, but you get to choose what you do with them now.
Yes.
And that's
You
a
do.
beautiful gift you can give
It
yourself.
is. It is. And we all have it.
Oh,
We
for
all have that gift. Yeah.
I found in my journey that I do better. So the inner bully, right? I used to
Mm,
get so mad at that part, that voice in my head taking me down and being like, "Oh," I'd rage at it. And I found the more that I raged at that existence, the more that part, that voice would have power and there'd be
mhm,
conflict and there'd be angst. But the more that I leaned into when that happened, stopping and saying to myself, it's fair that you're saying this because you're parroting what was said to you.
mhm,
We don't need that
mhm.
anymore.
Yeah.
And giving myself the opportunity to loosen on that negative and say, let's replace that with this.
Yes.
That
Yes, and this is why I call that inner critic the wretched abuser. Nobody can abuse me like I can abuse me, and I've been through some pretty difficult stuff in my life. Nobody can abuse me like I can abuse me, and when I do that to myself, when I allow that to happen, I am giving control back to the people who originally hurt me,
yeah,
right? And why would you do that? Why? Why
yeah,
would you do that? But we do. I'm saying that rhetorically, having been there for a really long time in that place.
yeah,
Right, but you do have a choice. You
yeah,
do.
for
Yeah.
sure. I think I slightly view it differently though because I don't call the parts of myself that choose to hurt me the wretched abuser because I find that if I attack myself with that negative language,
Mhm.
in and of itself in that action, I end up having negative ramifications. So instead, I
You
come
can say
to
that.
those parts of
Yeah.
myself with
Mhm.
gentleness and grace and
Mhm.
say, let's choose like why don't you choose a different role? What do you want to
Yeah.
be?
Yeah.
Kind of idea.
Yeah.
Because for me
Yeah.
personally, to label it that way has an internal it has internal ramifications where I'm still bullying myself, even with the label of that bully inside of myself, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense, and I suppose for me, the why I frame it that way is because that puts that person in another in that category of the people who hurt me, right?
Yeah,
So, like, all the people that I'm dealing with who made me a survivor, I'm putting them over there and dealing with them, and I have to put myself in that category because I've done a lot of things
yeah,
to hurt myself, and I think just the way my mind works and
works.
thinks about it, I group that part of me over there now, and that's somebody who I've worked a long time to heal that person.
Mhm.
All those relationships, I've done work to heal in all of those relationships, and that one has I've spent time in it. But I guess that's maybe just why I put it
Word
that way.
that way.
And I also think that, I guess, and this also I think gets to your point a little bit about choice. For me, when I think about it and the way that it sits with me, is that I didn't have a choice when those people abused me. Right. I
Mhm.
didn't. I have a choice when I'm doing it to myself, and that's why I put that wretched label onto it, and I say that nobody can abuse me like I can abuse me because I'm giving that power to myself
Yeah,
to treat me that way,
yeah.
right? And so that's why I think just that's why how my
Brain
brain
functions with it, yeah.
works around that, yeah,
Yeah,
around that being.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the great thing is we can have individual reactions and individual breakdowns of it, and I totally get how you have that way. For me, I had such a problem with, self-distancing and disassociation from
Me
myself
too.
that
Yeah,
I
me too.
don't ever like to other parts of myself because
Mm,
I wanna fully embrace all of me, and so when
I
other
understand that.
parts come up with
Yeah.
that have been very unkind, that have chosen what they thought were, because a person who's bullying you, the reason they're bullying you is they're in a place of lack, right? They're in a place
Yes.
of thinking they're low. And so that's the part of your brain who's saying, say this stuff before they do. So you change, you get perfect, you get better, you get improved. And you're not giving yourself the capability of having all of who you are because
Yeah.
nobody is perfect, right? So for me personally, because of that normal disassociation that I lived so much of my life partitioned and pulled back, that I pull that one in and I say,
Mm.
listen, I get it. I get it, boo. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
I think we're doing the same thing, but
Just
partitioning
talking
those
about it, thinking about it
negative.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say about integrating all of that, I mean, I've had an experience recently, and this relates, well, it's a close family member, where I've been working on healing this particular relationship. And I have very vivid, and very profound and vivid healing experiences. So I'll give you an example. So, a lot of my fear around my grandfather was attached to his eyes. He had these predatory eyes that stalked me for years. And I went through 6 or 7 major events and evolving those very predatory eyes to the last event, which happened to me in a Reiki session. I actually had the opportunity to see him as a 5-year-old boy. And when I saw him in his eyes, when he looked at me, all that was innocence and love. I saw the person who he was
Before.
before he himself was abused and succumbed to his trauma and human conditioning, right? And so that for me is like an integration process where my healing journey gives full humanity
Mhm.
to those. And so I've done that to my registered. I've given full humanity to that person, understanding that she existed because
Mhm.
something happened to me that caused her to exist, right? And so, I've been working on that, recently doing that same type of integration in another relationship in my family. And a lot of this is also God speaking to me to help me understand so that I can share with people like what's happening in these relationships and as you heal them. And what I learned from that process in healing this one is that if separated those parts of me, so if I separated my grandfather, if I separated my inner critic, who I call my wretched abuser, if I tried to separate those out of me, I would no longer be the whole human being who I am now. And so I it's a process for me to integrate all of that, right? It was literally God saying to me, you can't cut that off. Like you can't separate it out because it's who you are and that is how I designed you because without that you can't do the work that you do now. You can't serve other people. You can't share your message of hope and healing without those parts and those things that happen to you. And so healing the relationships for me is very much about humanity and integrating those beings as I understand them now into who I am as part of my wholeness. Does that
Yeah.
does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I totally get that. I recently just got horribly betrayed by a very close friend. I found out that they've been lying to me
So-
for 6 years
Oh, I'm sorry
about
about that.
yeah,
Oh.
it doesn't feel like a gift, but it's a gift. And what I mean by that is in that situation, you are given the opportunity to decide what and how you're going to do with it. It doesn't if it's
Mm,
painful and it's why it's painful is your body saying you deserve better. You deserve more.
mm,
What are you going to do with that, right?
mm,
So in that situation, I can sit there and be like, "Oh, that person over there, and they just showed up that way. I can't believe them. Oh my goodness." Right? And they decided to cope and lash out and attack and hurt a person, then cover it up, right? And lies. That was their coping mechanism. And I can
mhm.
sit there and denigrate them all I want. But I've been in a scenario and I don't cope that way. And so I can feel self-righteous that I don't cope that way, but how I cope isn't any better. I cut off
Right.
parts of myself. I mutilate myself until I am a tiny whim. Like I literally shelled myself out like I was a skin carcass just walking around filling
Mm,
up with what people wanted from me. That's
yeah.
not any better. It's
No, it's
a
not.
different
Yeah,
version
you're
of
right.
the same coping
100%.
mechanism. So
Right?
I can see myself and another person. It doesn't have to be the same behavior, but if I can see that person was acting off of a need of they didn't feel like they were valuable, and so they were doing something to try to gain the value they never received when they were a small kid. And
Yes.
that doesn't excuse the behavior.
Nope.
It doesn't mean that person gets proximity to me. It means I have compassion, grace, and love for them in the midst of saying, whoa,
Yes.
that's not okay. Both can
Yes.
exist, but my understanding and seeing my oneness in everybody and what they're doing allows me the freedom of anger and
Yes.
guilt and bitterness and revenge and
Mhm.
festering
Mhm.
because I can have a feeling of anger, but I can also have a feeling of love. I can have a feeling
Mm,
of sadness and have a feeling of joy. And so that betrayal for me was a gift because it allowed me to put in practice getting back on the horse and seeing how I can have peace in the midst of that. It gave me the
mhm.
opportunity to showcase that you can offer grace and boundary. And it gave me the
Yes.
opportunity to see that I still was allowing certain things, certain red flags, and certain actions that didn't match words to exist in my
Yeah.
world
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yep.
hold myself accountable to that.
Yes. 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 Yeah, so this is actual something that I call mirroring. I see myself in you and you in me, right? We're just
Yeah.
survivors. And
Yes.
there's no I mean, the way you survive is not any better or worse than the way that I survived. Right. So yeah, I see the exact same things. I actually talk about this. That is when I knew that I was starting to really give way. And I talk about this in the context of forgiveness, which I think is a very difficult word in this space. In fact, I when I was doing research to make the decision to write my book and figure out what I was going to write about, it started with a conversation with my therapist about what I thought about the concept of forgiveness. And I started like going out and trying to figure out like what is out there about forgiveness. And I found all kind of crazy things. And I was like, no wonder people are confused about what it is and how do you do it. And that is not a word that I use in the context of my personal healing journey. For me, it's very much been about letting go of the control the other person had over me. I get to that point when I can really see them too as a survivor. When I get to that point of mirroring where I see me and you and me, that's when I know I'm about to let go of the relationship and the pain that it's caused me. Now, I will say I have been to that place, and I'm in that place with certain relationships that I'm dealing with now. The other person is continuing to do things that cause me pain, and so I have to draw on other tools. But I understand that what that person is doing is really coming from their own survivorship, and whether or not I choose to stay in the relationship, adjust it, leave it, put boundaries around it, staying it the way it is, that's my choice, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of what we were talking about before, right? You can make that choice every day. But I do think, I mean, your point, we are talking before about like the conscious living, right? I mean, this is a conscious living opportunity for you because you now get to evaluate what you were doing to ignore the red flags, right? And to keep that relationship in your life. And you look back, you're like, well, I saw that coming, right?
Mhm.
Well, that's what conscious living is. Like, what are the things that you're seeing when you look around or you feel it in your body that you're not paying attention to that you should, right?
Mhm.
That's a great example of what conscious living is.
Yeah, and it's also the choice of how you decide to to see the scenario, right? Years
Hmm.
ago, that betrayal, I wouldn't have been able to fall back into peace so
I was
quickly.
gonna ask you about that. Like, what would you have done 10, 12 years ago? What would you have done?
Uh, I think that it depends. 10 to 12 years ago would be different answers, but I think, say 6 years ago, because I started my healing journey
Mhm.
5 years ago, I think that I would have sat there and I would have assumed that their actions were based in, "I deserved it."
Mm,
That's how I would have responded. I would have continued
mm,
cutting away at myself, and I
mm.
would have continued eroding myself, and
Yeah,
I would have thought, "What how can I love them better? Obviously, I'm failing them. Obviously, I'm not doing enough. Obviously, I'm never giving them onus for their own actions or taking onus for my actions."
yeah,
I would have had anger and resentment and bitterness, and I would have buried it under smiles.
yeah. It's fantastic awareness, right?
Yeah.
Seeing the difference in yourself,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
amazing.
It's
Yeah,
beautiful, and it's the
it is
past.
beautiful.
Yeah, and the past me, she was
Mhm.
baller. Like, the fact that
Yeah,
she could take where she was 6 years ago and then start in the middle of all of that, suppressed memories, feelings, all of that, and then take the movement and do the work, and even though I was coming from a type A personality, go-getter, hustle my way through, and that didn't work for me, I had to adjust to learning how to not hustle and how to be and all of that, but
mhm.
I have so much gratitude
Me
that
too.
I survived
Me
and
too.
that I moved from survival into
Mhm,
trying to be aware to
mhm.
all of the failings and the falling off and the ways that I hurt myself in that process. All I can sit with at this point is gratitude for
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah, I'm in the exact same place you are, for
Yeah.
all the same reasons,
Yeah.
different coping mechanisms,
Exactly.
but for all the reasons that you're describing it the way you are, I'm in the exact same place. So,
Yeah.
yeah, when I think about where I've come, I mean, that's why I talk about radical transformation because I'm a totally different person today than the one who walked into hypnotherapy room 6 years ago. June 19th is my anniversary. I mean, it's like it's literally a rebirth day for me.
Yeah.
It's a big day every year. I'm like, oh, look, I made it. Look at this amazing. I made it another year. And I just keep getting better and better and better every year, right? Which
Yeah.
is, that's why I'm here doing what I'm doing, hopefully to inspire other people to
See that they
start.
have it too.
Just start. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's the same passion I have is everybody is magic. Everybody has
Everybody
the
is magic.
opportunity to have
100%.
a life where they wake up excited. I go to bed
Yes.
and I might have to work late and I won't go to bed until midnight. And I wake up
Mm.
with sunrise because I am so excited for my day. And
Yeah.
it is not because it doesn't have chaos and it's not because it doesn't have bills. It's because I am living
Yes.
present
Yes.
every day and choosing
Yeah.
where I focus. So instead of in the
Mhm.
past, that trending line, I would have constantly been looking on that gap. And the more you stare at that gap, the more you look at the things you're not doing, the more you get that because you get defeat and you get hopelessness.
Mhm.
And I see those things and I give grace for those things and I focus on what I want more of.
Mm.
And my life is magic. And it's not
Mine
because
too. I agree with you.
yeah, I was like,
I
it's not
agree.
because I have people in my life that are causing chaos in my life, and I'm
Me
having to
too.
learn yeah, exactly.
Hard
It's
stuff, ugly stuff.
horribly ugly stuff, very
Mhm.
difficult stuff, and even isolating stuff at points because
Yes. Yes.
it can sometimes feel like the majority of the people in your family and the people surrounding you aren't making conscious choices, aren't coming from a place of love, and it can start to feel like I either have to live isolated or I have to be taking on everybody. And it's not either of those
Yeah.
things, but it can feel that way.
Yeah, I think and what I've experienced, and this comes back to what I was talking about before, we have to make the choice what to do with the relationship. What I've noticed is that, as we heal, our vibrational frequency is going up, right? We're leaving the fear-based emotion world and moving into the love-based emotions, and there's an elevation of your vibrational frequency. Like, energetically, you become a different being.
Yeah.
And for me, what I've noticed is it's almost like repelling magnets. And as I continue to ascend, that push is like just pushing, like like the repulsion of the other person is going further and further away. And I think that it's because they're still in the lower vibrational frequencies, but I think it's also because they see something in us that they just cannot grasp onto, and it may even contribute to their pain. Right. And so it is like it's just kind of like repelling, and if you're not, like, try to get my family to do their work to take their own healing journey, right? But that's not working. They have to make that choice. But
Mhm.
I do think that's part of what's happening, right? Is
Yeah.
that they're just so stuck that you sort of are repelling, you're repelling away from them. And maybe part of that is, God's energetic divine to protect us, to keep us, to help us, to help me understand like why that divide is there, why the distance is there, and to understand that they just haven't begun their journey and that's okay. That's where they are, but I don't have to live in it. I don't have to be in it. Right? And understanding that I've just moved to a different place. And that's beautiful for me, but not everybody's going to come along on that journey with us in our life.
That's their choice, their journey. I think also family, what's the saying? A prophet's never received well in his own hometown.
That is so true.
It's easy in the same way that it's easy for if you're living in default for you to see somebody stuck in a certain age, right? Stuck in a certain time frame, stuck in a certain
Mhm.
personality, that you can also get stuck in people's thought processes. Like I can so want for another person what I have. And the more that I grasp at trying to get them to understand, the more I try to explain it, the more I try to walk them through it or say the logic or say it in a different way, the more I try to explain, the less effective and the more silent I get. Not speaking to them, but
Mhm. Yes.
the more I just live it and I don't try. I just am and
Mhm.
I receive them where they are
Mhm.
without trying to say you could be here. Do you see this over here? If they're going to find the journey, if they're going to see the light, and they're gonna walk that way, they'll do it so much faster, so much more smoothly on their terms
Well,
if
they
I
won't
just let it go.
well, they won't do it until they're ready.
Yeah. But the
Mm.
opportunity is more I've seen a greater increase in steps towards the light, as it were, with
Mhm.
me just, "Okay, I'm done.
Yes. Yes,
Hands
I
off."
I think that's very true.
It's really
Yeah.
hard when you really love somebody that you really want them to see, you really want them to like because it's not like what you're wanting them to see is, "Love you!" Like,
And
"You're
it's really hard. You can't have the relationship that you wishing that you could have.
Yeah.
I talk a lot about that too. I mean, hope, expectations and how we frame people in our life just because we were born into them or they were born into us. Right, which I think is, human problem that we have. Like, just because you're my mother or you're my father, you're supposed to act a certain way. Well, where did I even get that idea of what that certain way is? Now, all of my expectations are tied up in this some dream person that I've created in my mind. You don't have the capacity to be what I've created. That's not even fair to you that I've created something in my mind and now I'm holding you accountable for not being the dream person I believe you are or I want you to be, right? And that's my problem because I have an expectation that doesn't match your ability to deliver, right?
Yeah.
You're not in that place. And I'm not, that's not right or wrong or bad, it just is.
Yeah.
You're where you are, you can't meet my so that's on me. I have to reframe my expectations of
Yeah,
that,
and
but
decide
that's
what to do
hard.
with it.
It's hard, but it's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
it's that is probably one of the things with certain relationships in my life that I have struggled the most with, because there's a part of me who can say, "I get it. I get where you are. I understand you've had your stuff and you're still in that place. You're in pain and suffering. I see you, survivor. I'm mirroring." It's the severing of the role that you were assigned to me when I was born, or with my
Mhm.
sister, she's younger, when you were born, severing that expectation of what I have in my head is normal, which
Uh-huh.
there is no such thing, or comes along with that.
Yeah.
right? And so the pain that I'm creating is my own, and that is that's probably the thing I've struggled with the most
Yeah.
in my healing journey is breaking that.
Yeah, the
And
reframe.
I've had to replace it, I mean, I've had to look at, where do I get a father figure, right? I've
Yeah.
had to go through work on that, right?
Yeah.
And, where does that come from? And for me, it's come back to, God is father and God is mother for me, right? And really bedding down into my spirituality
Yeah.
about how I've, received that nurturing and that love and that guidance and somebody who was always there for me, right? I mean, I've had to
Yeah.
reframe that, but that's been, I would say that's probably been the biggest challenge for me is dealing with my expectation of who you should be. It's
Yeah.
hard.
I agree with you. Not even a role sense, but in a what I want from when I was married. What I wanted was I wanted to be loved and I wanted to be accepted as I was and I wanted to offer love and acceptance to the other person, right? I wanted it to be both. But to love another person means accepting them where they are, and that doesn't necessarily mean receiving them and being proximity to them, right? It's fair that if you're giving love that you want to receive love, but if the person's not capable of loving, are you really loving them because loving them means accepting if they're not willing to give you back love,
Right.
seeing that and deciding what to do with it.
Right. And I mean, I think this is one of the reasons why we have to heal. And if I'm going to tell people you've got to do it, this is the reason why. Because as survivors, we don't know what love is. So, what you're describing, you were looking for something in a misguided view of what love. And I did the same thing in my marriage. I went into it looking for the familiarity of being abandoned. And that's what I got for 30 plus years. Right, in a marriage, right? And
Uh,
so I didn't know what healthy, proper love looked like. And the only way I have figured that out is to go through my healing journey, shed all that stuff that isn't love,
uh-huh.
right? And then through that process, discover myself, love myself, and then really begin to see what you're saying. Right now, I'm looking at you in a different way. And that means I have to meet you right where you are. And that comes with some hard choices sometimes about the person that you're talking about,
Yeah.
right? The reason to heal. And I say to people, if there is a destination on the healing journey, it is love. That's why in my acronym, the
Is.
L is love because that's where we're going. But I don't mean in the Hallmark kind of, romantic. And certainly that is an aspect of love and a relationship I'm talking about, but I'm talking about in all types of relationships. How do you show up in and with love for the other person and your own ability to give and receive in a healthy
Mhm.
way? Right.
Yeah.
And most survivors have no idea what I just said. I didn't until I went
Yeah.
on this journey, and
Well,
now
I
I
was gonna
understand it
say,
very
I
well.
would hear people say when I first started, people would say, "You can't offer to somebody else what you haven't offered to yourself in regards to love." They'd
Mm,
be like, "You can't love somebody else if you
great,
don't love yourself." And I was like, I
great.
knew I didn't love myself,
Yes,
but I was like, "But I love so well. I sacrifice everything."
that's not loving. That's
No, that's
I
it.
would I would I would challenge you that's your wretched abuser.
Yes.
That's what I did. That's what I did. I mean, I gave up literally every part, and that's why I didn't know me. I gave up every part of who I was, and I was actually working on something with my human design actually in the last couple of days about me being the type of person and my part of my soul work in this lifetime, what I am learning is not to be such an extreme giver that I corrupt the other person. And I'm not even talking about, I use the word corrupt, not even enabling. I'm using the word corrupt. I corrupt the other person and corrupt the relationship. And that's me
Mhm.
doing that
Yeah.
because and why did I do it? Because I was so desperate for validation of my worth and love me.
Yeah.
But for me, it just becomes this awful. I mean, everybody ends up in a cage. And that was the other word that was used where everybody is in a cage. You're corrupting the relationship to the point that that's what I am learning in this lifetime. And I've made progress and I can see it in relationships, but corrupting the relationship to the point of being everybody's in a cage because you don't know what love is. That's basically what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it took me a really long time to realize that my constantly sacrificing and giving up and doing everything wasn't love. The action could be loving, but it isn't loving when I'm always giving, cutting off parts of myself, and with the expectation that you have to validate my experience. You have to say, yes, you're so loving, because then I'm putting myself like a martyr. I'm doing it and then blaming you for not saying, "Look at how great
Mm,
you are." That's what I
yeah.
was doing continuously, and it was through the process of me stopping and realizing, okay, I'm going to learn to love myself and care for
Mhm.
myself and accept myself. That was a really hard one for me, is just accept and give grace where I was,
Mm.
because that is love. It doesn't mean you have to
Yes.
like it. Doesn't mean you have to be like, yeah, go you. Everything's awesome. It's not that. It's just saying, this is, I'll give you a hug, then we'll go from here.
Yeah, it's meeting yourself where you were.
Yeah. And it's from
Mhm.
that you literally find love, and then you're like, "Oh, me bending over backwards and cutting off everything, and then trying to bridge the gap, like, you're just standing over there and I'm, like, leaning over all of it and saying, 'Oh, why don't you love me back?'" Because that no, that was
Mm-mm. No.
corrupting, that was caging, that was abuse for myself and that person, because to
Yes.
love
Yeah,
them
absolutely.
was to give a
Absolutely.
boundary. To love
Yeah.
them was to say, "I'll go to here. Do you wanna meet?"
Yep. 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 Exactly right. Exactly right. I've
Yeah,
been there.
yeah. It's it's really easy to be a coping mechanism like this and be self-righteous,
Mhm.
because you look so caring. You look so kind. I was so loving. I knew how to be a great friend. Like, you can do that to yourself, but that
Yeah.
isn't what was. That isn't honest.
Yeah, no, it's not. I agree. It's not. Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
Took me to be so sad and depressed and what is life and question, for me to finally get and see that I couldn't stand on self-righteousness anymore.
Mm. No.
Okay, awesome. You gave everything and it's still gone. Where are you now?
Yes, I've been there. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because, like,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful, beautiful gift to give
It
yourself.
is a beautiful gift for you. It's also a gift to your kids.
Yeah. I think the reason I had kids is because I had to have them. I didn't love myself, so I think I would have
Mm.
just probably unalived myself at that
Mm.
point if
Sorry
I
to hear
hadn't.
that. Yeah, I'm
Just
sorry
being
to hear
honest
that.
about who I was, because I'd cut everything away. There was the only thing that was left was to cut it all off. But
Yeah.
I couldn't make that choice with kids, and I think that's why I
Mm.
had to have them. I love being able to see my kids have dignity in
Mhm.
themselves, to
Mm.
see
Yeah.
what they won't receive and see them put out boundaries and see them say, "Hey, listen, I appreciate you're struggling here, but that what you just did isn't okay. You don't get to
Yeah.
treat me that
Uh,
way. I appreciate
yeah.
what you're feeling. No, that's gotta stop."
Yeah.
The grace with the dignity, and, like,
Mhm.
watching them do that in life is just glorious.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It's a gift for all of you. I'm happy. I'm happy to know that because I feel like people like me, my generation. Sometimes I feel like we're just kind of a hopeless cause, but hopefully we can pass it on to pass it on to the younger generations, right? The youngsters and help them to have lives where they don't deal with some of this stuff.
Yeah, or
That might be living in my utopian world that I get into sometimes, but
yeah, yeah,
that's my hope. Do it for the kids, the youngsters. Let's spare them the pain.
yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like nobody's a lost cause unless they choose it, but I get what you're saying as far as trying
Yeah.
to
I
start.
mean, I'm 55 years old, so I was carrying 45 years. I mean, that's a lot, and it's a lot to unwind.
Yeah,
And I know that a lot of people in that place aren't going to do it because it's hard.
yeah.
Right? And so far underneath their coping mechanisms that climbing out of that place is just that much harder.
Oh, for sure.
So that's why, I mean, that's why I say that, and obviously I hope every single one of them are going to find their way to their healing journey. But I want to get to the kids before they're so far down in it that the mountain is just massive to climb out of.
When your frontal lobe is still enabling, you can give them the things where they have the coping tools that aren't just survival if they're in a safe
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
For somebody who's listened to this and feels really
Yes.
connected with you, where would they find
Mm.
more of you?
2 places. You can find me on LinkedIn, Substack, and YouTube by the handle at Beth Jones Healing Mentor, and my website is empoweredsurvivors.com.
Perfect. And if you wanted to leave everybody and you wanted to make sure they knew one truth, what would that be, that one truth you would want them to, like, really sit home with?
One truth,
Yeah.
you too can heal. I don't care who you are, where you are, you too can heal.
Preach.
That is the truth. Yeah.
That is my heart song. And in that realm, anybody who's listened to this and felt resonate with it, encouraged by it, and can think of anyone who might
Mm,
be benefited, please share this, because the whole reason that Beth
yeah,
and I
please.
exist in this world doing this space is
Yes.
for you.
Yeah, and that's 100% true. Yes, I've lived my experiences to share it with other people, which brings me great joy.
Yes,
So, yes, please share it.
exactly. Please broadcast
Yes.
it, because your
Yeah.
magic just choose to see it.
Yes, that's exactly right.